They thought the land was empty. Food was never comfort, only what kept them moving. The horses felt the world before the men did. The bow was never held for display, only for use. The younger ones watched more than they understood. The older ones did not need to look to understand. They never stayed long enough to leave anything behind. They did not wait for orders to begin moving. They did not move as one, but they never moved alone. The dust began to hide more than it revealed. Distance was no longer something they could measure. They moved faster than the eye could follow. They heard them before they ever saw them. They did not come from one direction. There was no direction left to face. The first impact came before anyone saw it. They did not see who had struck them.
They were struck again, before they could understand the first.
They turned, but there was nothing to face.
They heard the command, but not where to follow it. They saw everything, but understood none of it. By the time they understood the pattern, they were already inside it.
They did not close the distance, they controlled it.
No matter how they moved, the distance remained the same. They were pulled apart without ever being struck directly. Alone, they were easier to understand. They were held in place, without anything closing in. They moved, but not by their own choice. The open land began to close around them. When they looked back, there was nowhere left to return. They did not realize the circle had already begun. Only when the space connected did they understand they were surrounded. The circle was no longer forming. It had already closed. It was no longer about where to escape. It was about how to stand. Nothing moved, yet everything was already decided. One movement was enough to end the silence. It was never one action. It was many, at once. It ended without announcing its end. Nothing was happening anymore, but everything had already happened. It was over before the mind could accept it. Only after it ended did it begin to make sense. It was never about where they stood. It was about how space could be understood. What remained was not the battle, but the way it could be understood. They did not fight battles. They shaped outcomes before battles existed. What once moved across the world now only moves through memory. The movement ended, but its consequences did not. They did not conquer land. They mastered movement. In the end, there was no battle left to see. Only movement remained. They never stood still, because movement was all that remained. It was never about what moved, but what made movement possible. It no longer existed, but it still felt like it had once moved. You cannot see it anymore, but you can still feel what it took from them. It was not forgotten. It simply stopped being felt. There is no longer even the space in which something could have been. It did not end. It stopped being a place where anything could end. This was never a story unfolding. It was a structure already complete. It is no longer playing, but it is still there, in the way you remember movement. There is nothing left that even suggests something was once there. It is not that nothing remains. It tries to say something, but there are no words left that can hold it. There is no longer even a way to fail at describing it.